So exports has its own advantages, but since no country can flourish until and unless there is a local industrialization and local appetite to feed our people. So it's a 250 million people, 237 to 250 million people, depending on different sources. But as you said, we are adding up roughly 9 million people every year. So that comes to close to Sri Lanka every 3 years. So we are adding a country like Sri Lanka to our population every 3 years. Now to feed them, to have that basic need available, I think this is a decision that government and us as organization have to take, that how we are going to take that forward. So for example, take at the livelihood that we are going through. So plastics are key component in our part. Since I belong to plastic industry also, we run and operate PVC. But we can't go back in time now. So the dependence on polyethylene, polypropylene in our daily life, from a hygienic perspective, from other different perspectives of packaging and everything, we need to really understand that this is the need now and we can't go back in time. So how to handle that particular part? So in Pakistan, as of now, $1.5 billion import is coming in only these two polyolefins. So whatever we call about, but with we said population being growing up, this consumption is not going to go down. If I have to give another analogy into this process, is even last 4, 5, 6 years, because of COVID and recession in Pakistan, specific to our requirements, almost everything has gone down, and maybe few of the industries, those were in 2018, are at the same level in 2024. But that's not the case with polyethylene and polypropylene. So they continue to grow despite having everything into this case. So we really need to decide, and we understand that all these things cannot happen overnight, and these mega projects are absolutely dependent on government policy making and relevant stuff.
So your conclusion is that with the growing population and such a big base, the import substitution has to be there to control our account deficit.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There is no second thought on that.
Because we have 4 participants.
Yeah, please.
If you have anything more important to say, you're most welcome on this subject. Okay. Asif, I'll come to you. As said, import substitution is important, but somehow obviously the government and the country is more focused on export. You know, they talk of all the time export. In one of the tariff policy documents of Ministry of Commerce, I read that industrialists, investors don't come into export investment or industries setting up export because import substitution provides a higher level of protection, maybe 10% or whatever. What are your comments on this approach?
Okay, thank you, Shabbir. And first of all, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here and kind of share some of my thoughts on this subject. You know, there's this narrative, unfortunately, that has become now, it's taking on kind of very, very, almost at a level of dangerous proportions, which is import substitution is bad. Unless you export, the industry is no good. Right? And why is it bad? Because if you're an import substitution industry or you're putting a new industry in Pakistan, you require a certain tariff. Why do you require a tariff? You require a tariff not as a guarantor of profit. You require a tariff because of the inequities in the operating environment. We've heard all morning, we've heard about power. We've heard about infrastructure deficiencies. We've heard about high upfront capital costs, right? Because they are not provided by the state. We talk about why is Vietnam successful? Why is Cambodia successful? Why is China successful? You want to set up an industry, it's a plug-and-play situation, right? Whereas in Pakistan, that's not the case at all. So, you know, when you have a country of 250 million people, you have domestic resources, so you have two options. Either you import your requirements or you use your domestic resources for transformation to feed your local population. As you gain size, and if the government is successful in meeting its commitment to the people by providing a fair and equitable operating regime, which includes taxation as well, by the way, you know, right? So all these things add to the cost of doing business. So I think that it's not it's not a question of saying that people don't come in and invest unless it's for the local market. Why will they come and invest here when there are so many cost inequities?
No, that's one question regarding investment. The main question was because the protection level is, I wouldn't say high, but 5-10% between.
It's not high.
That's why, is that the reason that people don't go into export? The logic in many of the documents is reduce the protection so that people go into export. Is that the right logic?
First of all, 5-10% is not high.
Yeah.
You look at developed, and when I say industry developed economies like China, India, even today, they have tariff protection on products where their capacities are world scale. World scale, right? Because when you're looking at your own market, you look at what is your base requirement. Somebody who is looking at your market from the outside will also look at it as a destination to get rid of their exportable surplus. So all you have to do is keep tariff within a level, right, which is feasible, which doesn't in any way jeopardize your efficiency. And when it comes to export, there are already provisions available in the law, whether there used to be DTRE, it's now EFS. So you can actually get tariff.
Yeah. Is Rubina on the line? I can't see her online. Rubina, can you hear us? So maybe I can ask the next question to you. Rubina? Okay. So then Qayoom, I'll come back to you on this. As Asif said that, okay, Rubina is there. Rubina, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So, yesterday we were at the Ministry of Commerce and we were told by one of the officials of the Ministry of Commerce that the average tariff rate on imports in Pakistan is 10.6%, and that includes the ACD as well as RD. So obviously, the first thing is if you remove ACD and RD, the average tariff rate would come down to less than 10.6%. But my question is, even at this level, which is not very high, and as Asif said, 5-10% between two raw material and product is also not very high. But in light of that, the current and the past tariff rationalization, even though there is a current tariff rationalization program, talks about reducing the tariff rates. Do you think that tariff reduction program should also lay down that such reduction of tariff should be contingent upon and only done when the utilities like electric, gas, etc. are internationally competitive rates, and where the product in Pakistan is being protected with anti-dumping duty? What is your opinion on that?
Thank you, Shabbir. Thank you, Shabbir. I think I was just hearing to Asif and I was hearing to other panelists. When you look at the import substitution policy, in fact, all these factors, as you mentioned, the tariff, subsidies, which I mean the subsidized utility rates, regulations, or any other policies, they are all just various instruments of import substitution. And I would agree to you to the extent that if you are following an import substitution policy, then all these different instruments should support each other rather than contradict each other. To that extent, yes. Currently, as just Asif was mentioning, the cost of manufacturing is too high. And because these different policies, import substitution instruments, are not coordinating with each other. But I think where I tend to disagree with you is the use of import substitution policy. I think this is a big debate, I know, which is going on, whether the import substitution or inward-looking policies are better or export-oriented or outward-looking policies. I think when I say I disagree in the use of these import substitution policies, because generally, if you look around the world, the economies which have switched to export-oriented or outward-looking policies have generally benefited, and their industrial growth is more prominent than the economies which followed the import substitution policies. Our own experience has also seen that protection given once to the industries, they continue to live on that protection. And after many, many years, after even decades, they are not competitive enough to come out of this protection, and they live on this protection for years. So I think it's a very valid debate right now whether the current tariff structure, which is just one instrument of import substitution policy, should be changed or not. And I think when we are talking about the import substitution policy, and especially the selective import substitution policy that we have been following so far in Pakistan, it always, like when there is an element of selection, it always leads to discretion and elite capture, and of course misuse and corruption. So the big businesses in this situation, the big businesses are always in a better position to manipulate the policy. So there's
Sorry,
probably
I would interfere. You're right. When you're talking about 20-30% tariff protection, you'll be right there. But what we are discussing here on this panel is industries where the nominal protection is 5% between the raw material and product, or maybe 10%. So in that context, if you could answer, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, no. I'm just coming to that point. I was just building the background for the point I'm just trying to make. So when you say the cascading tariff is actually is for the tariff is actually for the import substitution policy, because what is import substitution policy? Import substitution implies that there is less tariff on raw material and intermediates, and there is high tariff on final products. Now, what happened in Pakistan is that we messed up this distinction of intermediates and final products. So whatever the local manufacturer is producing, now we are considering is at his final product. So if you look at the structure, you would see many intermediate products at a higher tariff, at 20 and even higher than that. So this has actually messed up all the tariff structure. And you can't say that now what tariff or what kind of protection should be available to all these industries, because these are intermediates, like many chemicals and other, like you was mentioning, the plastic and all that, but they are at 20% tariff.
Rubina, I agree
So
with
what
you
would you
that
do?
intermediates should not be 20-25%. I think we in the industry, we find that there are very few, rather none of these industries, but maybe we can engage on that with you. But what I'm talking, for example, is that the finished product, which is 25%, a semi-finished product like 20%, and then the intermediate would be 10 to 15%, and the raw material will be 5%. So I'm talking in that context. Do you think there is further scope of reduction? And if yes, why? Number one, that's question number one. And question number two, with the electric rates at 15% versus China 10%, and all these factors, other factors that Asif mentioned, do you think it should be done now?
I think the other issues are very valid issues, you're right. But ultimately, I think when we talk about tariff rationalization or tariff policy, we need to move away from this higher tariffs. I think that's my personal opinion, and I think that's what I have gained through my experience working in this area as a policymaker for a pretty long time, that we should at least, in a longer term, decide to move away from this import substitution policy. We can't continue with this policy for a very long. We've been doing this for the last 30, 40 years, and we are still in a mess.
For the benefit of the
So if we
participants, what do you mean by higher
keep on
tariffs?
doing this for next many years, I think we will stay here. We will not moving forward.
No, I appreciate your viewpoint, but for the benefit of the participants, when you say higher tariffs, what is the rate you're talking about?
Sorry?
I appreciate your viewpoint, but for the benefit of the participants, when you say high tariffs, what is the level of tariff you're talking about on, for example, intermediate product? Consumer product, I'm not bringing in the discussion at the moment.
No, but I think you have to bring the consumer products into concession in a say, because if you still want to follow the cascading tariff, I think it should be 5, 10, 15 maximum. It's
So you're
raw
saying the
materials,
consumer product should
intermediates,
also
and
be
final goods.
15%?
It should not be above that.
Okay.
So the 5, 10, and gradually what I'm suggesting here is that gradually we should move towards tariff structure where these gaps between the various slabs are minimum.
Okay. Even though this question has come later, but I'll ask this question to you, Rubina, that with the EFS now liberal, most of the exporters are importing the products in the EFS. So one logic always was to facilitate export, the tariffs of intermediate products should come down. So now with this liberal EFS, do you still think that the tariffs should come down? I mean, you just said 5, 10, 15, but later on it should be lower than that also. So do you think later on it should be still lower than 5, 10, 15, considering that we're going to feed more than 300 million people?
Diwan, if you just can answer my question regarding how many are the users of EFS or these. So there are hardly, I think, not more than 10% users of these schemes. So 90% of the small businesses are still out of it. It's only the 7 to 8, 10% big businesses which use this facility.
No, with the EFS
So
now, there is
I
also
think
indirect
it's
export
more
allowed.
appropriate if we generalize this, reducing tariff for everyone rather than making it selective for few. So that's, I think, is the difference of opinion here.
No, that's
So
appreciated.
experience has generally shown that incentives are more productive if we make them general rather than specific.
Thank you.
So my view is that reduce tariff across the board rather than giving these through various schemes.
I would just add here that the new EFS, the indirect exporter is also allowed to import. So the many small weaver who has 20 looms also can take part in the EFS through his ultimate buyer. And number one. Number two, obviously we have the duty drawback scheme. Your point that the small exporter doesn't benefit from lower duty, benefits from the lower duties. That what we have seen that the rupee has depreciated from 160 to 280, but we have rarely seen all these field exporters approaching the FBR for revision of duty drawback system if they were really interested in. But let's go to the next question. Qayoom, I'll ask this question to you. Rubina just mentioned 5, 10, 15. What is your view on the cascading level between the raw material, basic raw material, intermediate, and finish? Do you think it should be 3% between each, 5% between each, or 7% between each, considering that you have been in this field for quite some time and you are actually investing money in this field?
So thank you very much again. So allow me a few minutes on this. So there is two things to it. One, we need to, as Asif Sab also elaborated, we need to really compare what is the ground field. So a balanced field need to be important. Our capital cost when we put up any project, this is 37 to 42% additional capex that you have to incur in terms of the peripheral activities, so utilities, so this and that. So whatever you call it, sir, in a precise basis, 37 to 42% as additional if you are putting up a plant in Pakistan. The second part, Ma'am Rubina also elaborated that we take a business case based on import substitution and we go with a tariff structure and then assume that it will continue for perpetuity. But you see, just an example. Last 3 years, 2 years to be very precise, 2022, 2024, the gas price has moved from, the captive gas and industrial gas also moved from 1,200 rupees to 35 as of yesterday's, day before yesterday's notification. So my company, like very small company in this overall Pakistani arena, if you take the duty structure separately and what the other policies are impacting the businesses, the gas bill has moved from 700 million rupees a month to 2.4 billion rupees a month. So if tariff is also taken away and then all these other areas, those are coming into the action, then how businesses will survive with additional capex, with irregular practices and policies that at any point in time are not going to be continued for. So this has to be looked in the overall perpetuity. There's three.
But if your competitors' gas price, if your competitors' electric price also go up higher, then you shouldn't have a problem. No?
So again, that's the point, because we are in a business where 85% of our product portfolio is import based. So PVC is not, there is no local partner into it. And similarly, but that should not be taken as the consumer has to eventually pay. Na? So that's number one. Number two is there, for in case my caustic competitor, they are all on biomass or coal. So they will not get impact, but I'll be impacted by 17% of gas rise, number one. Number two part, you talked about EFS and so when we started up the hydrogen peroxide plant, the EFS segment was importing in Pakistan was 38% to be precise. And TD is also here. As of today, it's 73% is being imported under EFS category with the same segment, but it's everything is under EFS because of the point that it's very difficult. And I think it's at the minimum that 5, 10, 15, whatever that, but I agree with Ma'am Rubina that those which are intermediate products should not be treated as a final product, and nobody is, I think, saying that.
And repeat the question: 3, 5, or 7% between each cascade. Sorry,
No,
I'm putting you in a spot here.
No. So 3, 5, 7 is not going to work in a way. Then you have to make the ground balance also on other parts. So then discount us on that 43% additional cost. Discount us on that energy cost also.
You have to work on both fronts.
Yeah.
Good. And at one point of time, under invoicing was also diluting your net protection. Is this still the case? I mean, not yours, but generally, if you look at import substitution industry.
So yes, it's there, but I think now with there is a lot more has happened in the last few years over China and Pakistan. So some data sharing has happened. So I believe a lot of control has
No
has
data
happened
sharing
in
has
this.
not been done as yet, but you're right. If it is done, then
Yeah,
we should.
so that's the only thing.
Irfan, I'll come to you. Sorry, I've been asking other people, but you've been just listening. Despite such a high trade surplus and still growing, Chinese government does not let the Chinese yuan to strengthen. Normally, when you have a trade surplus, your currency strengthens. The Chinese yuan has remained between 6.5 to 7.2 in the last 10 years. In fact, it is now 7.3. Do you think this kind of strategy signifies Chinese government support subsidizing export industry of China to compete aggressively and affecting Pakistan, because Pakistan is importing a lot of from China and your industry is expanding Chinese imports? And since the major injury is from imports of China, should the government of Pakistan counter and support the Pak industry with a better import substitution production in light of this fact?
I mean, thank you very much, first of all, Shabbir sir, for inviting me on this panel. And principally, I agree with the question. And the reason being that, we have many other incompetencies in the system. We have been discussing about power, infrastructure, investment, and everything the whole day. And what we need to do is probably go through tariff rationalization and import substitution, of course, because we cannot compensate for all these inequities without getting into that. We don't talk about subsidies, but we talk about all these inequities which need to be accounted for. Even now, I mean, with my experience in especially in the chemical industry, basic differentials, I mean, we are talking about 5%, 10% or 15% differentials. There are HS codes, which, if you import the finished goods, they are giving you the same duty structure. And there are HS codes in the raw material also, which are giving you the same duty structure. So there needs to be some rationalization.
The argument there is that you have value addition, so it should give you the protection if we win at the same rate. But anyway.
So I mean, I think there are very basics. I mean, we need to cut through probably the supply chain of particular segment we are talking about. I would agree to a certain extent with Rubina also, that we need to give a differential to the local industry, but we also cannot do it across the board. I mean, we don't have an infrastructure in terms of industry in Pakistan, basically because we have very selectively developed industry here.
As you said, we don't need to give all. We all know 75% of the products coming from China will be zero duty. So we are talking only about the 25%. But anyway, coming to you, Ather, obviously Rubina has a point of view, and there are many people who have the same point of view that import protection should come down. But today, a country like USA, with such advanced technology and with high freight cost as a barrier or advantage, is talking about imposing higher tariffs. President Trump says that I want to enrich my taxpayers at the cost of the foreign suppliers, rather than enrich the foreign suppliers at the expense of my taxpayers. Of course, there is not the correct logic, because when you import tariffs, your taxpayers also bear the burden. But then, yes, foreign suppliers also bear the burden. But how do you view this approach in terms of strategy in light of our own foreign minister's statement you saw in the morning? Also, he said whenever finance minister, sorry, whenever Pakistan grows as more than 2, 3, 4, 5%, the DNA is that the imports increase, tremendous resulting in trade surplus. So how do you view this approach?
Okay, so I'll actually just sum it up by, in my view, very clear. If you want an industrial policy, you want industry to flourish in your country, you want to be able to make to supply, right? You have to provide and recognize what the ground realities are. And you have to provide an operating environment that allows businesses to operate and meet those demands. No one is saying in perpetuity an industry should have 50% tariff, and that's absolutely correct. You shouldn't. Because if an industry needs 50% tariff in perpetuity, shut it. Right? It actually should be there. But countries move very fast to protect their domestic industries. And it's not just America today with Mr. Trump saying, I'm going to impose tariffs. If there is even a threat of export into Indonesia, without any inquiry, there's an anti-dumping duty. India has multiple non-tariff barriers. You tell me, if tomorrow anyone wants to get up and sell their products in India, can they do it? Very difficult, right? So I think it's you have to look at it. Yes, look at it industry by industry. There has to be some selectivity, because to say no, it has to be one broad brush for everyone, that also is not the right approach.
No, I agree with you. A lot of countries have a very, very proactive approach in protecting their local import substitution compared to Pakistan. As you gave the example of India. India is producing in synthetic fabric, synthetic yarn, then raw material of synthetic yarn, basic raw material. Synthetic yarn from China increased from, for example, 10,000 tons to 60,000 tons per month. No. Anti-dumping was there. They removed the Bureau of Indian Standard exemption from that items. So they are not now approving the Chinese suppliers. So cut, no more Chinese import, non-tariff barriers.
So you ask, Mohammed is sitting here, ask him the non-tariff barriers for cement export to India in the days when trade was open.
Yeah. So, and again, this yarn is used by the weaver textile industry to export, but to protect the local industry, they did it. Yeah. We'll come to the next question. Again to you, Asif. As you part of answered that question, my question was, would reliance on tariff reduce the incentive for innovation and efficiency for local industries? But you partly answered it already.
I don't think so at all. Okay. Because, like I said, I'm very clear that if you need high levels of protection, and 5, 10, 15, and if you look at increments of 5%, perfectly reasonable with a top rate of 25, which also, if you look at WTO or any of the multilaterals, 25% is the top rate of tariff, right? For a final product is the acceptable level, right? Now, if you need 50, 100% tariff, then really you should not be in that industry. Then you're actually wasting resources.
Okay, Rubina, the next question is to you. Can you hear me? Rubina, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Pakistan exports are mainly in traditional items like textile and leather and sports. Pakistan needs to increase, obviously, exports of non-traditional items. Do you think those industries, and Pakistan needs to export, obviously, to overcome the trade deficit and then prepay the IMF loans. Do you think Pakistan, in industries in Pakistan who put up larger capacities of items of non-textile, which were earlier imported, and they managed to export 10, 20, 30% by putting up a larger capacity, do you think their nominal level of protection should be kept more than 5% or 10% so that they are able to, export at cost and benefit from the local market?
Sorry, Diwan, I couldn't get your question. What are you actually trying to say?
My question was that Pakistan's exports are mostly on traditional items, textile, leather.
Right, right.
Now, obviously, we see to increase those exports, we also have to increase exports of non-traditional items. One way of increasing non-traditional export is not that I one day set up an industry and export 100% of the non-traditional item, which I was earlier importing. One way is that I set up a larger capacity of our import substitution industry, feed the local market with 60-70% of the capacity and export the balance 20-30% capacity, and slowly build up a market and increase Pakistan's non-traditional exports. So in doing that, obviously, I need the local import substitution protection being undisturbed. So do you agree that for such an industry, the tariff protection should be 5% or 10%, so that it's able to, increase Pakistan exports and increase the presence of Pakistan in non-traditional item exports?
I think again, I would tend to disagree with you on that. If we want to get more exports, and especially other than textile, I think we need to follow the outward-looking or export-oriented policy. And this is a fallacy in Pakistan that we believe that we can increase exports by using import substitution policies. Import substitution policies can never increase your exports. The manufacturer would never be inclined to export if there is high protection available to its product in the local market. I mean, it's a common sense. If he's getting a higher than the world price in the local market through 20% protection, why would he export at the world price? So I think we need to be very clear on that these policies work in a broad sense. And when we say one selective, one product, one commodity, or one industry, by giving protection to that product, we can increase the industrial production. That, in my view, is a fallacy. And as I said earlier, unless and until these incentives are broad and for everyone, I think it's a slow process. I agree with you. It's a long process, but this is the way to go into exports.
Okay, I was also talking about policy. I was not talking about any specific industry. But anyway, that means what you're saying is that if somebody wants to increase or go into non-traditional exports, he should rely totally upon the export market and not worry about import substitution protection. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to rationalize the tariff. You need to lower the tariffs on raw material and intermediates and also on the final goods if you want to get into the exports.
Okay, I'll come to the next
Otherwise,
question.
there is always an incentive to sell in the local market.
If he's operating at 60-70% capacity and he's able to export it, break even at export, he will definitely export. But anyway, let's not continue the discussion on this. Let's go to the next question. How should government, Qayoom, the question is to you, how should government determine which, because Rubina was just talking about selective import substitution, but I still put the question to you. How should government determine which import substitutions means indigenization is beneficial and which is not?
So, Shabbir Sahab, I think this can be looked in two contexts. Since we majority are from the petrochemical side or a bigger industry, so in Pakistan with the current structure and industry being set up on an export orientation in our scale of things, I think that if Asif Sahab can help me, I can say it will be impossible to put up a chemical industry in Pakistan and purely on exports. In current scheme of things, I feel it will be extremely, extremely difficult.
Many chemical and many other non-traditional items.
Yeah, so I'm linking on this, but the point only is that this government has to decide that what is their look ahead in this overall part. So if we have to really flourish in terms of the overall self-dependency and the exports beyond, we need to look at Chinese and Indian models. Obviously, Singapore is a different model. I'll not go into that, but we have coal. So we can think of converting coal to chemicals, and then the plethora of products will be available. But this all has to come from government's need, because nobody can do those $10-12 billion investment in Pakistan. So I think that it's very tricky what is good to do import substitution, what is not. In isolation on a smaller scale, we can pick projects, those are beneficial, but on a bigger scale of things, it has to be a consistent policy that can drive the export orientation or import selection.
Asif, you were thinking of giving your view on this?
Yeah. Look, I think I'll just demonstrate it by a very simple example, okay? A product that we make, right, which is a chemical, soda ash. Now, there are two ways in which you actually make soda ash. There's a synthetic process and there's a natural soda ash. Natural soda ash is actually mined, it's purified, and it's shipped out. Cost of production, half of what it is for synthetic soda ash. Synthetic soda ash, 3 years ago, well, not 3 years ago, 2 years ago, energy was about 40%, 45% of product of cost of goods sold. Today, energy is, in Pakistan, 80% of cost of goods sold. We're taking local raw materials, salt, limestone, converting it into a finished product. You tell, now that's an import substitution product. So what do? You say that, no, throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's a intermediate. It's not a basic raw material, but it's an intermediate. There should be 5% protection, and compete with Turkey or compete with America, who have actually got 5 million and 15 million tons each of natural soda capacity. So, it's very simple to say that, no, it's import substitution is bad. Either you're export competitive or you should just shut shop.
Yeah, you're right. We should stop import substitution. We will not go into export, we'll go into real estate.
Yeah. I mean, honestly,
It's not a question
you want industrialization or you don't want industrialization?
Rubina, again, the question is to you. This is regarding anti-dumping. For 20 years now, because import substitution, when you are producing a product and competing against imports, the many foreign countries export their product at below their cost, which is called dumping. They're selling their product at a higher price, or they're killing each other even in the local market and killing Pakistan in the process, so they're dumping. So now 20 years, in many cases, notified anti-dumping duty is not collected. And in some cases, never collected. My dismissal of court petitions is not collected. So anti-dumping duty is imposed, notified, but not collected. Means the injury to the import substitution industry in Pakistan is not mitigated. Mitigated means not covered. You have been with the National Tariff Commission dealing with anti-dumping and also for some years as chairman. So you must have a better perspective on this about the non-collection. Why is it that NTC or the government has failed to control this evasion of anti-dumping and therefore not protecting the local import substitution industry against injury from dumped imports?
Thank you, Shabbir. I think you know my view on that. I am totally agree with you that this should not happen. Okay. Once authority has decided through a very deep investigation that it is an unfair practice by any foreign country and they are dumping their product here, it should be anti-dumping duty should be imposed on that. But I think I know and you know what are the reasons for not collecting this anti-dumping duty. We live in a world where there are more than one systems in a country, and you know it's all because of the justice system in our country that NTC was not able to implement those duties already decided. We made an effort in these cases, in certain cases, to approach the judiciary and highlight to them that this is unfair. But unfortunately, we couldn't do anything. But I totally agree with you. I totally 100% agree with you that there should be a strong system in place to implement if the anti-dumping duties are decided once.
But our personal experiences in the last 20 years, it has not been done. So then, if it is not done, and the government in the meantime makes a system or whatever, but in the meantime, would you suggest that for that item, the government should impose a regulatory duty? Because the injury has been determined, but the injury is not mitigated through collection of anti-dumping. So do you think the government should then impose regulatory duty?
I think you know what's the difference between regulatory duty and anti-dumping duty. So regulatory duty means it is for everyone. It is on any kind of, for the same product, any importer or any source of export is taxed. Whereas the anti-dumping duty is specifically for those exporters who are dumping. So there is a huge difference between regulatory duty and anti-dumping duty. But I would still say, I would still not support the idea of putting regulatory duty if anti-dumping duty is not collected. I think we should always address the problem where it is,
No, I'm
rather
because it has
than
not been
like
addressed for the last 20
circumventing
years.
it.
I mean,
So I think it should be highlighted even at the higher level, and I think this is the one forum where you can highlight this, that these measures should be implemented.
Sorry, I'll make a very blunt remark. So should we let the local industry die then while we highlight it?
No, it doesn't. There are still, I think you are talking about one particular case, but most of the anti-dumping duties are being collected.
Okay. Okay.
You look at iron and steel and chemicals and all that. I think you are the one exception.
No,
And I
I'm
think
not
that's
talking
why
about
I'm saying
myself.
that
I
there
meet
is
every
always
day.
conflict of interest.
I leave it to
And when
Asif.
you do
I meet
selective
every day
things,
compatriots who are saying that it's not being
both the
collected.
parties, they then like at the fight to influence the policymakers.
Hey, Rubina, so cold rolled steel, which is imported from China, not only is there a 5% duty because of the FTA between Pakistan and China, but when there is an anti-dumping imposed, the anti-dumping is not collected because the traders actually go and get a stay order. Then before the stay is heard or vacated, they've already sold it and no duty is collected. Now, whether it's collusion, whether it's deliberate, I have no idea.
I will leave it here, Asif, but I will, one more thing on anti-dumping before we close the session. There are a couple of other questions, but we'll close the session because it's going to be 6 p.m. In your field of polyester, for example, there is we find many countries, particularly in filament yarn, nearly 7-8 countries imposing duty from 4 to 40%. But in Pakistan, somehow, the National Tariff Commission, when it goes to on-site inspection or whatever, the level of duty, you were mentioning this morning also, the level of duty is 2 to 3%, whereas in the same product for the same period, for the same supply, the duty by other countries, 7 or 8 countries is higher. So what are your comments on that?
Okay, now this you asked me a very difficult question.
We'll discuss it over tea.
We should discuss this one over tea.
Okay.
But however, I will say that when Rubina was there as chairman NTC, there was a hell of a lot that was done in NTC to address and provide some redressal to the industry's issues, which we, by the way, had not seen for years before and have not seen since.
But I'll give you one example. In one of the products in the year mid-2000, Europe imposed anti-dumping on Pakistan, 5%. The Pakistan ambassador went, Pakistan economic counselor went to European Commission, explained to them that you're doing this wrong. Technically explained to them. They didn't agree, no, we will not. They insisted and they put it. Then Pakistan won the case in WTO, but that case was won after 5 years. In the meantime, they protect his industry. So even a country like Europe is doing it. One last question regarding India. The trade of India, Irfan, is going to open up. And if Pakistan, if India uses non-tariff barriers, Pakistan does not use non-tariff barriers. In fact, Pakistan notified anti-dumping is not also collected. So under the current anti-dumping law, you have to show 2 years of injury, then you collect the apply. It takes 3 years by the time you are injured a lot. So in case of India, which is very near and imports come quickly and there's no freight, would you consider a fast track? Would you suggest the government a fast track anti-dumping?
Yes, because anti-dumping, as in current state, as we all agree, I mean, it takes a lot of time, and we have seen the history of collection in our country as well. So yes, there should be a tariff rationalization here, and there should. I mean, we are already experienced a lot in terms of Chinese imports. So mostly the competition that is going to come, or it's actually going to help us. I mean, if we talk about it and open.
Fast track anti-dumping. But anyway, let's close the session because I think we're running out of time. Thank you, Rubina, for your comments and opinions, and thank you all. I hope the audience has learned something from our discussion. Thank you.